So we're live on YouTube now.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Mike Warren, Chairman of this licensing subcommittee. I have two colleagues on the subcommittee, Councillor Sarah Peck and Councillor Kevin Parker. Firstly, if I could just go through some housekeeping matters. We've actually got two members that are within the DDC buildings, so I'm afraid they're subject to the fire alarm system. So if it does go off, we will have to suspend the meeting. They will have to leave the building. If we do, it shouldn't happen, but if it does, we will probably suspend the meeting for half an hour and then try and reconnect. If we're unable to do so, then we will have to suspend the meeting and try and convene one as soon as possible after today. We are being recorded. Could I also ask, if you do have a mobile phone, if you could keep that switched on silent, please. Thank you. Can I ask the members of the committee, do you have any interest to declare, and the nature of such interests?
No interest to declare, Chair.
No interest to declare. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a hearing to consider a new premises licence for the Wheelwright Arms, Church Street, Watford. The procedures will include the paperwork that I will summarise as follows. In a moment, the licensing officer will outline the application. The applicant will then make their statements. Those persons making representations will then make their statements. All parties and the subcommittee will then have the chance to ask questions. Both sides will then have the opportunity to sum up their cases. Andrea, can I ask you to outline the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is a new application by David Michael Stilgo. The application was advertised and the applicant's agent has supplied me with copies of the advertisement was in the newspaper and the blue notice. Those documents were shared with councillors yesterday. Can you confirm that you're happy to continue on the basis of those documents?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So all statutory authorities were served with copies of the application. During the consultation process, we received no representations from any statutory authorities. Two representations were received from interested parties. They are local residents. The concerns were in relation to public safety and prevention of public nuisance only. There were no representations in relation to protection of children from harm or prevention of crime and disorder. The application is seeking alcohol sales between 9 AM and 10:40 PM daily, with the closure at midnight. Midnight? With the exception of New Year's Eve, when the premises will stay open until 12:30 AM the following morning. The premises have had the benefit of 13 temporary event notices over 31 aggregate days between the 19th of October 2019 and the 5th of September 2020. Temporary event notices are limited to 15 in any calendar year, with an aggregate of 21 days per calendar year. A condition on the planning permission limits the use of the premises to 80 days per calendar year at present. When granting a premises licence, it doesn't grant any permission under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. Therefore, the applicant has to be mindful of all the restrictions on both the licence and any planning permission granted. The applicant could be liable to enforcement action under this legislation if there's any breach of any existing planning permission. There are conditions proposed by the applicant that address any issues raised, and also accompanying information that gives a background to the use of the premises. Some emails were forwarded to me by local residents and the Daventry MP, Chris Heaton Harris. I passed them on to the applicant's agent, who will no doubt be presenting them through the hearing. Councillors, you need to consider if the conditions proposed by the applicant are substantial enough, or if you need to consider further conditions. Any conditions need to be proportionate and appropriate to promote the full licensing objectives. Only those that are listed on Appendix B will be transposed onto the licence. You may approve the application, refuse the application, add or amend conditions, or limit licensable activities if you feel it is appropriate and necessary for the promotion of any of the 4 licensing objectives. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I admit to failing to ask everybody to introduce themselves. So before we just query, ask any questions of Andrea, can I just ask everybody to just introduce themselves, please? If I can go along from the top of my screen. Louise?
I'm Louise de Labloire. I'm the legal representative for the panel.
Thank you. Councillor Parker?
I'm Kevin Parker, District Councillor, Daventry.
Catherine?
I'm Catherine Holton. I'm the committee officer for this hearing.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Parker? Could you just introduce yourself, please?
Sarah Peck.
Sorry, Peck. I apologise. Sorry, Sarah.
Councillor Sarah Peck, Daventry District Council.
Andrea?
Andrea Hill, Licensing Enforcement Officer at Daventry District Council.
Thank you. Mr. Worthington?
Yeah, Mark Worthington, licensing consultant agent for the applicant.
Thank you. And Mr. Stilgo?
Hi, I'm David Stilgo and I'm the applicant for the Wheelwrights Arms.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Members, do you have any questions of Andrea?
No questions from me, Chair.
No, I don't have any. Okay, Andrea.
Chair, I do have one, if I may. I just want to clarify the terminal hours, 2300, not 24, as Andrea stated.
Yes, yeah, I picked that up as well.
I do apologise for that mistake.
Not a problem. I just wanted to clarify it for complicity.
Yeah. Okay. Right. If I could now ask Mr. Worthington if you could outline your case, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, members of the committee, as previously stated, I represent David Stilgo, who's the applicant, who's also online to answer any questions you may have. You have the application before you in your bundle and the accompanying documents which supports the application. I don't intend to go through that line by line. I'll just touch on the more salient points. You're aware Watford is a small rural village just off the A5 with a population around 320 as of the census in 2011. It has no community asset, so to speak, save for the church and the village hall. The pubs that did serve the village were all closed by the mid-80s, and the village hall is really only used for private functions. In 2019, a local landowner, Andrew Eden, in response to requests from the community, agreed to and funded the conversion and refurbishment of an agricultural building on his land to a pub. This is the subject of this application, the Wheelwrights Arms. If I can refer you to page 1 of the bundle I supplied, which is an email from Mr. Eden showing support for the application and also offering the use of neighbouring field which he owns for parking on an occasional basis. But also ask you to refer to the aerial plan which I supplied. It's a aerial photograph of the site, and the plan supplied to you in the supporting documents to the application. You can see the building itself is quite small. Total footprint of around 6.3 metres by 7.3 metres. The front of house floor space is 25 square metres roughly, with room for about 22 people to be seated inside the premises at tables, with another maybe 4 or 5 stood at the bar. So it is a small premises. The garden area is a small orchard with pollarded apple trees and picnic tables, and there's a space for a small marquee, dimensions 12 metres by 6 metres, which can be erected if we need to for special functions. As your officers informed you, a planning application was submitted and accepted by Daventry District Council Council, which commenced on the 2nd of January last year. A number of conditions were attached to that planning consent. They are shown on pages 3 to 5 of the main bundle I supply to you, but the most significant and relevant to this application are number 3, no amplified music outside. Number 4, the facility may only be used for 80 days per calendar year. Number 5, the terminal hour of 2,300 hours. And number 10, a record of when the premises is open is to be maintained in a register. The refurbishment was completed in 2019. The premises is operated on occasions, as your officers told you, for the last 18 months using temporary event notice authorisations. There have been 13 temporary event notices, some of them being for 2 or 3 days, and there was no adverse reports in relation to any of those events. We are now applying for a full premises licence in line with the planning consent. This is for the pub to be open between 0900 hours and 2300 hours daily with alcohol sales for consumption on and off the premises terminating at 22:40. We are not applying for any other licensable activity, and there is the 1-day exemption for New Year's Eve. We obviously will not be open 7 days a week, as we can only open 80 days in a calendar year, and it is not economically viable for us to run the business for less than 80 days in the year. Ordinarily, we would not just open for 1 day. Any beer, any real ale that we have in stock would have to be consumed within a week of it being tapped. So ideally, we will open for 2 days, consecutive days, so we can sell the beer without its quality deteriorating. So simple math shows that we will not even be open every weekend. It's unlikely that during the winter months we will open much, save for events perhaps on Halloween, bonfire night, events during the festive season, and we would mainly use the days that we have to open during the summer months, when attendance is likely to be better and people can sit outside to enjoy the weather. It's also very unlikely we'll start trading at 900 hours. We would normally open around lunchtime, work through the afternoon into the evening. We've only asked the 0900 opening to allow for flexibility to cater for other events, such as maybe a wake following a funeral service at the church or early morning refreshment for the local hunt, if it runs and decides to run from our venue. We don't offer food ourselves, but on occasions, a local lady that runs the Barn Sabai Thai food as a stall, and we've had a hog roast caterer and a local ice cream vendor on site. In the past, we've used the tents to run the premises as a pop-up pub, and on odd occasions, these have been for specific events such as the 4th of July celebrations, St. Patrick's Day, New Year's Eve, and we actually had a Brexit party as well, where customer numbers have been higher than normal due to the event being run. It is likely that we'll repeat these type of events because they were very popular and successful. We have a marquee available to us, which is cited as indicated on the aerial plan, and it may be that we'll have another temporary bar in the marquee to reduce pressure on the main bar if it's particularly busy, or we may just use the marquee to afford cover during inclement weather. For these type of events where attendance is expected to be greater than normal, that we would use the adjacent field for parking. We intend to put down plastic permeable paving grids in the field. This allows the grass to grow through, but would not prevent the ground being cut up and rutted by vehicle traffic. The gate to the field from the road will be improved, and we'll have a pedestrian entrance made, which will take us directly from the field into the premises, and that is shown on the plan. As outlined in the supporting documents, the document supporting the application, there is great support from a large selection of the village for this pub to become more permanent. As mentioned, there's not been a pub in the village for over 25 years, and it's well known that pub can be the heart of a village community, providing a place for villagers to meet and socialise, improve their mental well-being, and especially in these difficult times with the COVID restrictions, which we've all been subject to for many, many months. It's not only Watford village residents that support the application, but also others from neighbouring villages that would like to make use of the pub when they exercise walking from village to village. There are a number of comments in the document supporting the application, and there are an additional 28 letters and emails of support, including one from our local MP, Mr. Heaton Harris, who I do not intend to take through all of these. No doubt you may have read them, but they can be summarised, some of the statements from them as follows. The opening of the pub on a temporary basis made a positive change to the spirit of the village. It brought together what was a socially fragmented village community. There's never been a pub in the village for as long as I can remember, and I for one feel this is detriment to the community. It's a great way to bring our sometimes divided community together. Many of us enjoy the walk through the fields on a bright day between the two villages, and having a pleasant hostelry halfway through our journey provides some food and drink in good company is a real treat. I myself have lived here for 20 years, and for most of that time only knew a handful of people, mainly immediate neighbours, but because the village had no focal point. Since the Wheelwright Arms opened on a temporary basis a couple of years ago, this has changed. I know a large proportion of my fellow villagers, and me and my wife have made many new friends, and they go on and on in a similar vein. The pub also has a visitors book. The photograph should have been supplied to you of what's the comments in those books, and again, it's all positive responses. So to summarise, we intend to operate as a small community pub serving the local village and surrounding villages, operating mainly during the weekends of the summer months and for specific events through the remainder of the year. We are filling a social void that has been in the village for decades with the full support of most of our community, many of whom have taken the time to write letters and emails of support. And in my 7 years of experience as a licensing consultant, this is an unusually high number of supporting letters that as accompanies an application. If there are any further questions about the operational aspects of the pub, Mr. Stilgo is available to answer them for you. And unless there is anything further I can assist you with, I will stop now, but obviously reserve the right to respond to representations as and when they are made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I just had one question. Concerns the marquee. What is the nature of the events that you will be, sort of having there? I'm just a little bit unsure as to what you're doing there.
Yeah, the marquee is basically it's an extra space. Obviously, the actual premises is very small inside.
Right.
And so if we have an event outside and the weather is inclement, we can put the marquee up so that it can be used to shelter. But also if we do have like the 4th of July celebrations or something like that, where we're having a few more people, then the marquee can be used for that as well. Maybe Mr. Stilger may be able to just expand on that.
Yeah, hi. The marquee really just is an extra seating area for when it does get busy, or as Mark says, if the weather's bad, it's just for them to be in there. It's not to house any, like bands or anything like that, because we're not allowed to do so. It's just literally for somebody to keep, if it was, some people there to keep them dry and warm.
That's fine, thank you. Members, do you have any questions at all?
I've got no questions, thank you, Chair.
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Louise, are you okay with everything? Okay. I don't have any further questions. I'm sort of happy with everything that's been said so far. I will point out that the environmental health officers and the police have made no objection to this. We can only look at this under the 4 licensing objectives. Would you like to sum up at all? Mr. Worthington, sorry.
Yes, Chair, sorry, just finding me mute button. Yeah, Chair, I mean, in relation to the representations, as you say, there has been no representations. You have there the photographs that I supplied to you in relation to Church Street, where some of the objectives were making representations in relation to parking and how it's going to obstruct the road. There is no real potential for that to happen. You can see from the photographs, actually a fire tender can get through there quite readily and quite easily. In relation to parking, there's been no complaint by the police to the premises in relation to parking, and that has been actually confirmed by the police in relation to that. I had an email from PT Tracy, and she says there's been no official complaints about parking the Wheelwright Arms to the force control room between June and October last year. No officers from the police have attended the vicinity to address those parking issues, and they were mentioned to another police officer, a local police officer, who was dealing with a separate matter, but he didn't need to attend the pub to actually deal with it. There's no issues from any of the residents in Church Street. Parking has never really been an issue there. When the church is operating, we don't see how the pub's going to increase that at all. Most people will walk to the pub, either from the village or from other villages. It's that sort of thing. It's only a small place. Having said all that, we are willing to add a condition to the licence just to try and alleviate concerns of the people that have made representations, that asking people to park considerately. And I did include that in a bundle there, and that poster is actually already in place, ready for when we can open. In relation to traffic collisions, there's been no traffic collisions at all. Police haven't objected on those grounds. Potential injury for pedestrians due to traffic. You can see from the photographs there's actually a footpath that runs the whole length of Church Street. So there is no real potential for any injury to pedestrians. And it's a quiet street. It's not a main thoroughfare. It's a quiet village street. So I can't see any issue with that at all. Emergency vehicles having access, again, as I said, there's been no representations from the police, fire, or the health authority who represent the ambulance service. They are all happy with access, and as you see from the photographs, there's plenty of room for vans, large vehicles and the fire tender to pass, so there's no obstruction for that. Residents in Church Street, again, there's no residents that made any representations. One of the representations you have mentions that a resident requires regular ambulance attendance for a medical treatment. As we understand it, that is for renal treatment. It's not an emergency response, and it's to take the person to have a renal treatment. But that is during the week when ordinarily we wouldn't be open. In relation to noise, there's no representations from Church Street residents again. We've got the condition on the licence, on the planning permission in relation to no sound systems in the garden. So we're not going to be turning it into a big music venue. It is a quiet community pub where people can gather and have a drink. And Mr. Cox, who is a resident at Garden Cottage, the premises, which is only 10 metres away from us, he's made no representations and also offered a letter of support. And in relation to the church actually serves a number of villages in the whole area, and they take it in turns to host the church services on a Sunday. So it's only like to be a church service there once every 4 weeks or 5 weeks. And the church service would normally be between 8 AM and 9 AM, so be finished by the time we were allowed to open, but we're not really going to be open until lunchtime anyway. And the vicar's now told us that it's likely that the church is going to become a festival church, and it will only be used for celebratory services such as christenings, weddings and funerals and the like of that. So there aren't going to be, we don't think, it's not been decided yet, but we don't think there's going to be regular church services. So to sum up, I believe we've mitigated and rebutted the representations that have been made and put before you. As you say, there's no representations from any of the responsible authorities, often regarded as the guardians of the licensing objectives. So it can be assumed that they are content with the application. The police have actually responded that they will support the application. Environmental Health said that the conditions added to the planning change of use will cover any concerns they had in relation to the licence. And as you will be aware in the guidance at paragraph 1.19, there's no need to reproduce those conditions because they're already in another statute. Your statement of licensing policy says the authority wishes to facilitate well-run and managed premises, and the licence holder is displaying sensitivity to the impact of the premises on the local residents. The authority recognises that provisions of entertainment is a major contribution to the economy of the area, attracting tourists and visitors and a source of employment. And the authority will also have regard to the wider considerations affecting the residential population and the amenity of the area. We would argue that our application only reflects positively in relation to those statements. So we would argue that our operation isn't going to impact negatively on the licensing objectives. For all the reasoning I've put before you today, we invite you to grant the premises licence as it's applied for, making conditions as you see fit consistent with what was submitted in the operating schedule at section M of the application, and with the additional condition if you feel fit regarding the responsible parking notice, which we're willing to accept. Unless there is anything further I can help you with, Chair, that is my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peck and Parker, do you have any further comments at all?
Nothing from me, Chair.
No.
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. Right. What we'll do now, I'm afraid Mr. Worthington and Mr. Silver, we're going to put you into the waiting room for a short while we just to discuss our decision, and we'll call you back very shortly.